Welcome to the Hindu Daily.
It's great to be back. And looking at the stack of sources for our deep dive today, it really feels like we're casting a wide net.
We really are. We have 11 distinct pieces from today's paper. Our mission, as always, is to find that connecting thread, the signal in all this noise for you.
And it is quite a roadmap.
Yeah.
We're going from the editorial and opinion sections through science, text and context, all the way to business, foreign, and even the Friday review.
A full journey. So let's just dive right in. We're starting in the editorial section with the piece titled The Erosion of Environmental Justice in Modern India. That word erosion feels very intentional.
Oh, absolutely. It's a powerful metaphor because it's not just about soil erosion. The article argues it's about the erosion of legal principles. For years, the foundation of Indian environmental law was something called the precautionary principle.
The idea being, if you're not sure a project is safe, you just don't do it. Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. You err on the side of caution. But what the source contends is that we've seen a major pivot away from that. The new philosophy is more like development first, and we'll deal with the consequences later.
And the article points to a specific date, a turning point, December 18th, 2025.
That's the one. That was the day the policy for non-coal mining fundamentally changed. You see, before that, if you wanted to start a mine, your environmental impact assessment, or EIA, was tied to a very specific piece of land.
Which makes sense. You have to assess the impact on that forest, that river.
It seems like common sense, doesn't it? But the new policy, it sort of decouples the assessment from the geography in the early stages.
Wait, what does that even mean? How can you assess an impact without knowing where the impact is happening?
Well, that's the heart of the criticism. It shifts the process from a scientific field study into more of a bureaucratic box-ticking exercise. It's a generic assessment, not a specific one. And this is compounded by a Supreme Court decision to recall a key judgment, Vanashakti versus Union of India.
And that judgment was about what exactly?
It had banned something called retrospective clearances. Basically, it prevented companies from getting forgiveness for environmental damage they'd already caused. Recalling that judgment sort of opens the door to legalizing violations after the fact.
The article uses the Yarra Valleys as a prime example of this erosion, and it brings up this, frankly, bizarre debate over what constitutes a hill.
It sounds almost comical, but the legal consequences are devastating. The court accepted a definition that says a landform is only legally a hill if it's over 100 meters high.
So a 99-meter-high ridge, which is still a massive landform, is legally considered what? Flat?
Legally, it's not a hill. And if it's not a hill, it doesn't get the same protections. It can be mined, built on, whatever. But the problem, as the source points out, is that nature doesn't operate on these arbitrary legal definitions.
It's all connected.
It's a single geomorphological system. The real ecological value of the Yarra Valleys isn't just in the tall peaks. It's in the lower ridges, the foothills, the fractured rock formations. That's where the hydrology is.
And hydrology means the water table.
Precisely. The Yarra Valleys act like a giant sponge for the entire region. They capture monsoon rains and slowly release them into the aquifers that supply water to Delhi and Gurugram. When you strip away those short hills, you're essentially paving over the sponge. You're killing the ability of the land to recharge its own groundwater.
So it's a legal loophole with very real, very dry consequences.
That's a perfect way to put it. The source also highlights the case of mangroves in Maharashtra. The Adani cementation project was sanctioned to destroy 158 mangroves. The justification was compensatory afforestation?
Meaning they'll plant new trees somewhere else to make up for it.
Yes, and the article calls this a dangerous fallacy. You can't just treat a forest like a set of interchangeable Lego bricks. A mature mangrove ecosystem is an incredibly complex bioengine.
It's not just the trees themselves.
Not at all. It's the root systems that have been stabilizing that coastline for decades, protecting it from storm surges. It's the unique saline environment that supports incredible biodiversity. Planting a sapling a few kilometers away doesn't replicate that. It might take 20 or 30 years for that new tree to provide even a fraction of the same benefit, and that's if it survives. We're trading a proven shield for a hypothetical future one.
It all paints a very grim picture. The author uses this phrase, that the Constitution, specifically Articles 21 and 48A on the right to a clean environment, is becoming a silent witness.
And that's a chilling thought, isn't it? That the legal framework designed to protect our environment is just watching from the sidelines as it gets dismantled by technicalities.
A really sobering piece. Let's say in the editorial section, but pivot completely. From defending the environment to, well, defending the nation. Article 2 is titled, Modernizing the Frontline.
And this piece strikes a much more optimistic tone. The headline number is that the defense budget has finally crossed the 2% of GDP mark. It's up from 1.9%.
Which might not sound like a huge jump percentage-wise.
No, but in real terms, it translates to a 15% hike in the budget, and that is the first double-digit increase we've seen in decades. But the really important story here isn't just the total amount of money, it's about how that money is being allocated.
I noticed that. The capital expenditure is now higher than the revenue budget for the first time in a while.
And that is the crucial strategic shift. Let's quickly break that down for our listeners. The revenue budget is mostly for day-to-day running costs. Think salaries, pensions, fuel, maintenance, just keeping the lights on.
And the capital budget is for buying new equipment.
Exactly. New fighter jets, new tanks, new submarines, modernizing the forces. The fact that the capital outlay is up by over 22% signifies a clear policy decision to prioritize modernization over just maintaining the status quo.
But the article points out that the money isn't spread evenly. The Air Force gets a massive 32% increase. The Army gets a 30% boost for heavy vehicles. But the Navy, they only get a 3% raise. Why the disparity?
It's a bit of an irony, actually. The Navy is, in a way, being punished for being too successful.
How so?
They've been the champions of indigenization, of the Make in India initiative. They have focused heavily on designing and building their own warships right here in Indian shipyards. Because they aren't writing huge checks for expensive foreign-made ships, their budget requirement on paper looks smaller.
Whereas the Air Force is buying big-ticket items from abroad.
Precisely. They have enormous bills to pay for imported fighter jets and transport aircraft, so their capital needs are just much, much higher. But the source does flag some serious hurdles.
The bad news, as it puts it. The rupee's value is one of them.
Right. A depreciating rupee eats away at that budget increase very quickly. If you've planned to buy $1 billion worth of aircraft parts and the rupee weakens, you suddenly can't afford all of them, your purchasing power shrinks.
But the article seems more concerned with a bureaucratic hurdle, the L1 rule.
The lowest bidder rule. This is a classic problem in government procurement across the board, but it's especially damaging in defense. The rule says you have to award the contract to whoever submits the lowest bid, the L1.
Which sounds fiscally responsible on the surface.
It does, but in the world of advanced technology, the cheapest option is very rarely the best one. This rule effectively kills innovation. You could have a brilliant Indian startup with groundbreaking drone technology, but they simply can't compete on price with a massive established company that's churning out older, less effective models for cheap.
So we end up with outdated tech because it's cheaper.
Or we're forced to buy from foreign suppliers who can afford to undercut everyone. The other major gap identified is in R&D. India's research budget is just 0.66% of GDP. Compare that to Japan at 3.7%. There's a call for the private sector to step up and fill that innovation gap.
Fascinating. Let's move over to the opinion section now. Article 3 takes us into a different kind of conflict zone, the relationship between governors and state governments.
Yes, this has been a real flashpoint recently. We've seen these incidents in several opposition-ruled states, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, where the governor either walks out during their address to the legislature or deliberately skips reading certain parts of the speech.
So what is the constitutional law here? What's actually supposed to happen?
The article brings in two legal experts, PDT Akari and Alec Prasannakumar, to dissect Article 176 of the Constitution. This article is very clear. The governor must deliver an address at the first legislative session of every year.
It's a mandatory duty, but the speech itself, the governor doesn't write it, correct?
That's the critical point. The speech is prepared and approved by the state cabinet. It's meant to be a statement of the elected government's policies and legislative agenda for the coming year. The governor is supposed to be the mouthpiece, the formal voice delivering the government's message.
And PDT Akari's argument is that changing the speech is a violation of that role.
He's very firm on this. In his view, the governor has no constitutional authority to edit, omit, or add to the text. When they do, they are essentially imposing their own personal or political views. And as an unelected appointee, that's a direct violation of democratic principles.
But the other expert, Alok Prasannakumar, adds a bit of nuance. He talks about the governor being an integral part of the legislature.
Right. Under Article 168, the state legislature is formally defined as the governor and the legislative assembly. We often forget that. The governor isn't just a ceremonial visitor. They are a structural component of the legislative body. Their role is to facilitate its functioning. So when they walk out or obstruct the address, they aren't just making a political statement. They're actively preventing a part of the legislature from functioning as intended.
So why is this happening with increasing frequency? What's the underlying problem?
It boils down to what the source calls the agent of the union problem. You have to remember how governors get their jobs. They're appointed by the president, which in reality means they are chosen by the central government.
And the key issue is their job security, or lack thereof.
Precisely. They serve during the pleasure of the president. Unlike a Supreme Court judge who has a very secure tenure and is difficult to remove, a governor can be dismissed with a phone call. There's no process, no security.
Which makes them vulnerable to political pressure from the center.
Extremely vulnerable. If the party in power at the center wants to disrupt or antagonize a state government run by an opposition party, the governor becomes the perfect instrument for that.
Are there any solutions proposed?
Well, abolishing the address entirely is floated, but that seems unlikely as it would need a constitutional amendment. The more realistic path, according to the experts cited, is to reform the appointment process itself. Perhaps giving governors a fixed, secure tenure so they can act with constitutional propriety without fear of being fired for not towing a political line. The consensus is clear. Personal politics must give way to constitutional discipline.
A really complex constitutional tangle. Okay, let's shift gears completely and head to the science section. Article 4 is titled The Silent Crucible. And, wow, this one really reframes the conversation around fertility.
It does in a profound way. It directly confronts what it calls the Indian fertility paradox. The paradox is that while conception is a two-person process, the social and emotional burden of infertility in our society falls almost exclusively on the woman.
She faces the shame, the exclusion from family rituals, the blame.
It's treated as a personal, almost a moral failing on her part. But this article brings in the hard biological science to show how misguided that is. It focuses on the massive and largely ignored role of male mental health.
We're talking about a direct physiological link between stress, depression, and sperm quality. The article gets incredibly specific, mentioning the mitochondrial PDK-PDC axis.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's the core of the science here. Let's try to unpack it. Think of a sperm cell. Its one job is to swim. To swim, it needs a huge amount of energy.
Right. It's got a long journey.
A very long journey. The engine that produces this energy is the mitochondria inside the sperm, and that engine needs fuel. The PDK-PDC axis is essentially the key part of the fuel processing system. It helps the mitochondria burn fuel efficiently to power the sperm's tail.
Okay, so it's the engine's control unit.
That's a great analogy. Now, what recent research shows is that when a man is experiencing chronic stress or clinical depression, the hormones associated with that state like cortisol directly interfere with this axis. They dysregulate it. The fuel processing system breaks down.
So the sperm literally runs out of gas.
It either runs out of gas or the engine can't start properly in the first place. The mental state directly causes a physical, cellular level energy crisis. And it's not just about energy. The source also points to the HPA axis, the body's central stress response system.
The fight or flight system.
Yes. When that's constantly activated, it floods the body with cortisol. And cortisol is a known suppressor of testosterone and spermatogenesis, which is the actual process of creating new sperm. So you get fewer sperm, and the ones you do get are low on energy.
And the article points out this creates a tragic, vicious cycle.
A truly vicious one. Our patriarchal culture tells men to be strong and not talk about their mental health, so anxiety and depression go unaddressed. This unaddressed stress then biologically impairs their fertility. The couple can't conceive. The pressure and stress on both partners intensifies. And who gets blamed in the end? The woman.
And it notes that stress isn't a passive factor for women either.
Absolutely not. Studies show that high levels of stress in women lead to elevated levels of an enzyme called salivary alpha amylase, and higher levels of that enzyme are directly correlated with a reduced probability of conception month after month.
So the big takeaway here is a call for a paradigm shift in how fertility is treated.
A huge one. The article argues that fertility clinics need to start screening for mental health, for anxiety, for depression, as routinely as they screen for hormone levels or do physical exams. It's not just a nice-to-have add-on, it's a fundamental biological necessity for successful conception.
Powerful stuff. Let's move on to text and context, where we have two big articles on the energy sector. First up, Article 5, Evolution of Indian DISCOMs.
DISCOMs, the power distribution companies. For anyone following the Indian economy, these have been a notorious weak link for decades. They've been synonymous with massive debt, inefficiency, and constant government bailouts.
But this article starts with a genuinely shocking headline. They've reported a collective profit, a profit of 2,701 crore in the last financial year.
It sounds like an economic miracle, doesn't it? After years and years of losses, suddenly they are in the black.
So what happened? How did they pull off this turnaround?
Well, the article lays out the official reasons. There's the government's RDS scheme, which basically tied central government funding to measurable performance improvements. No improvement, no money. And then there are new late payment surcharge rules.
What did those do?
They put the squeeze on the DISCOMs to pay the power generation companies on time. If they delay payments, they face hefty penalties. So on the surface, it looks like a story of improved discipline and efficiency finally paying off.
But the article then digs a little deeper. There's a but.
There's always a but. The analysis in the source questions whether this profit is, a real operational profit or more of an accounting phenomenon. It uses the example of Tamil Nadu's DISCOM, TNPDCL.
What did they find there?
TNPDCL did show a profit on its books, but, and this is the crucial part, it only did so after the Tamil Nadu state government injected a subsidy of over 15,700 crore and also took over a massive chunk of their existing losses onto the state's own budget.
So it's not that the company became profitable, it's that the government paid its bills for it.
Exactly. It's a bailout that's being presented as a balance sheet recovery. Now, to be fair, the source does say that operational efficiency is improving. Things like transmission and distribution losses, the amount of electricity lost in the wires are coming down, which is good news. But the overall financial health is still critically dependent on these huge subsidies from state governments. They're not out of the woods yet.
A story of progress, but with a major asterisk. Now, let's talk about the next article in Text and Context, which might be a genuine game changer. Sodium-ion batteries.
This is a really exciting piece. Everyone knows about lithium-ion batteries. They power our phones, our laptops, our electric cars. They're everywhere. But they have well-known problems.
Lithium is rare, it's expensive to mine.
Yeah, and the supply chains are concentrated in just a few countries, which creates geopolitical risk. Sodium-ion batteries are presented as the next pillar of energy storage, and their main advantage is abundance.
Where does sodium come from?
Soda ash. Basically a very common industrial chemical. It is plentiful and available almost everywhere. There are no supply chain bottlenecks.
But the performance has always been the issue, right?
Historically, yes, it's down to basic physics. A sodium atom is physically larger and heavier than a lithium atom. So for the same size, a sodium battery just can't pack in as much energy. Its energy density is lower.
So you wouldn't use it to power a lightweight drone or a high-performance EV?
Probably not. But the source argues that for things like grid-scale storage, big battery parks that stabilize the power grid, the weight isn't as critical. And it has one killer feature that lithium just can't match: safety. Specifically, the ability to be transported at 0 volts.
This was a fascinating part of the article. Can you break down why being able to ship a battery at 0 charge is so important?
Absolutely. It gets a little bit into the chemistry, but it's crucial. Inside a typical lithium-ion battery, the anode, the negative terminal, uses a thin sheet of copper as a current collector. The problem is, if you discharge that battery all the way down to 0 volts, the copper starts to dissolve into the liquid electrolyte.
That sounds bad.
It's very bad, because when you go to recharge it, that dissolved copper doesn't go back smoothly. It reforms as tiny, sharp, needle-like structures called dendrites. These dendrites can grow right through the internal separator membrane of the battery, creating a short circuit. And that's how you get fires. It's why lithium batteries are classified as dangerous goods for shipping and can never be transported fully empty.
And sodium-ion batteries avoid this problem.
Completely. They use aluminum foil as the current collector instead of copper. It's cheaper, it's lighter, and most importantly, aluminum does not dissolve at 0 volts in that particular electrolyte. So you can drain a sodium battery until it is a completely inert rock. No energy, no risk. You can stack them, ship them, even drop them, and they are perfectly safe.
That's a huge advantage for logistics and safety.
A total game changer. And the article makes a powerful point for India. We largely missed the boat on becoming a lithium-ion manufacturing powerhouse. But the sodium-ion wave is just beginning. The technology needed is very similar. The source says existing lithium factories can be retooled to make sodium batteries with relatively minor changes, like better vacuum drying systems.
So it's a second chance to get in on the ground floor.
Exactly. And with new cathode chemistries, like layered oxides, the performance gap with some types of lithium batteries is already closing. Projections suggest that by 2035, sodium-ion could be significantly cheaper than lithium-ion. This could be a huge opportunity.
Okay, let's head to the business section. Article 7 is titled Software-mageddon. A bit dramatic.
Well, it was a dramatic week on the stock market. The S&P 500 software index fell by 13% in just a week. That's a massive sell-off. Big established companies like Salesforce, Adobe, Intuit all saw their stock prices tumble.
And the cause is summed up in 2 words: AI anxiety.
It's this growing fear among investors that the rise of powerful generative AI models could make a lot of traditional software obsolete. The thinking goes, why would you pay a hefty subscription for Salesforce if a custom AI agent can manage your customer relationships for a fraction of the cost? Why buy Adobe Photoshop if an AI can generate and edit images from a text prompt?
It's an existential threat to their business model.
It is. So we're seeing a market rotation. Money is flowing out of these big software tech stocks and into so-called value stocks, things like energy and industrials, which are seen as safer bets in this new landscape.
But the article mentions a contrarian view.
Yes, some analysts believe this is a classic market overreaction. They argue that these large software platforms are deeply embedded in corporate infrastructure. You don't just rip out your company's entire financial system overnight, so they believe the sector is oversold and might bounce back. But the anxiety is definitely real.
Let's jump over to Japan with Article 8, Japan's Fiscal Crossroads.
This piece is about the aftermath of a landslide election victory for the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party. All eyes are now on Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. The market knows her as a fiscal dove.
A dove, meaning she's not afraid to spend government money.
Exactly. She favors stimulus and government spending to boost the economy, and this makes bond investors very nervous. The fear is that a huge spending spree would weaken the yen and push up bond yields.
Which would hurt Japanese consumers through higher import costs.
Right. But here's the irony that the source points out. Her massive landslide victory might actually lead to more fiscal stability.
How does that work?
Because her majority is so large, she no longer needs to form a coalition with smaller opposition parties. And many of those smaller parties were demanding even more aggressive, some would say reckless, spending policies. Now that she doesn't need their votes, she has the political freedom to be more moderate and resist those extreme demands if she chooses to.
And what happens in Japan matters globally, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Japanese government bond yields are a benchmark for borrowing costs worldwide. If rates go up significantly in Tokyo, that can create ripple effects, pushing up interest rates everywhere from the US to Germany.
Moving now to our foreign section, Article 9 has a very somber headline: The Sunset of New START.
A very somber moment in international security. The article notes that as of today in our podcast timeline, February 5th, 2026, the New START treaty has officially expired.
This was the last remaining nuclear arms control treaty between the U.S. and Russia.
The very last one. And its expiration means that for the first time since 1972, there are absolutely no binding legal limits on the size of the world's 2 largest nuclear arsenals.
The article stresses that it's not just about allowing them to build more warheads.
No, the much bigger and more immediate danger is the loss of transparency. The treaty wasn't just about caps, it was about verification. It mandated on-site inspections and a constant exchange of data. Each side had a clear, verified picture of the other's capabilities.
And now that's gone.
It's gone. We are now in a world where intelligence on nuclear arsenals has to rely primarily on satellites and other remote surveillance. And that's a recipe for mistrust, misinterpretation, and worst-case scenario planning. Paranoia can take over.
And the China factor complicates everything.
Immensely. China has always refused to join these treaties, arguing its arsenal is much smaller and purely defensive. But their arsenal is growing rapidly. And now neither the U.S. nor Russia is willing to limit their own forces while China is building up unchecked. We're facing the very real risk of a 3-way nuclear arms race being conducted in the dark.
Let's stay looking at the sky. But for Article 10, with a more nostalgic feel, the descent of the Orbital Cathedral.
This is about the International Space Station, the ISS. After more than 25 years of continuous human habitation, its time is coming to an end. It's scheduled for a controlled deorbit in 2030.
They're going to crash it into the ocean.
Yes, SpaceX is developing the vehicle that will give it the final push to burn up in the atmosphere over a remote part of the South Pacific Ocean known as Point Nemo, the spacecraft cemetery.
The source calls it a cathedral to human cooperation.
I thought that was a beautiful phrase, because it really was. For a quarter of a century, it was a symbol that nations could work together. The most striking example is that even when relations between Russia and the West completely collapsed on Earth, their astronauts and cosmonauts continued to be partners and crewmates in orbit.
But that era is ending. The future is private space stations.
That's the big shift. The model is moving from government-owned and operated stations like the ISS to commercial outposts run by companies like Axiom or Blue Origin. In the future, government agencies like NASA won't be the landlords. They'll just be tenants renting lab space when they need it. The diplomatic age of space exploration is giving way to the commercial age.
A truly historic transition. Okay, for our final piece, let's come back to Earth and find some beauty in the Friday Review. Article 11, Reviving the Lost Murals of Karuvelippura, Malika.
A wonderful story to end on. This is about a remarkable art restoration project happening in the Fort Palace complex in Thiruvananthapuram. They are bringing 300-year-old murals from the time of the ruler Marthandavarma back to life.
And the article describes the artistic style as being very unique.
Yes, it's called the Fort Palace style. And it's fascinating because it's a blend of different traditions. You have the foundation of the classical Kerala mural style, but then it's fused with techniques and details from Rajasthani miniature painting.
It also mentions a Tamil influence.
Right. You can see it in the details of the figures. The types of jewelry they wear, like specific nose pins and bangles, are distinctly Tamil in style. It just goes to show how much cultural exchange was happening in that court 3 centuries ago.
The restoration itself sounds like incredibly painstaking work.
The restorer, Saju Thiruthal, is highlighted. He's had to work on panels like Venugopalam, a depiction of Krishna with his flute, that were so faded and damaged they were almost invisible. It's like revealing a ghost.
And after all that work, can people go see them?
And here's the poignant catch. The murals are not open to the general public.
Why not?
To protect them. The pigments are so fragile that the humidity from crowds of people breathing, the light, the dust, it would all accelerate their decay. So access is limited to art historians, students, and conservation experts. It's a restored beauty that must remain a bit of a secret to survive.
A hidden treasure, then. From the secrets of ancient art to the future of nuclear treaties, we've really covered the full spectrum today.
We certainly have. A true deep dive.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.